Okay, we're live. I just want to give a few people a chance to get in here, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do. Sometimes there's a little bit of dead space. We'll see. I don't usually give them too much time. I just maybe a minute and a half. I don't want a lot of dead time. And then we'll get right into what we want to do. And like I said, it's going to be recorded anyway, so more people will see it on the recording than they actually will probably here tonight.
Is that distracting to see my microphone up that high, John?
No, I want one like that.
Oh, well, I usually use it on another computer, so this is unusual for me. I'm going to have my eyes will dart back and forth as I look at my other screen. Just a little unusual for me because I'm used to being on the other end. Yeah. I have the face for radio, they say.
Yeah, you got the mic for radio too.
So yeah, I do. I like
those famous ones that, and not so famous, like Howard Stern with his big microphone he used to have, and some of the other ones that are out there. I used to see, what's his name? Letterman, and there's another one too. I can't think of his name that he did the show with the big mic. Man, I can't think of him. He doesn't do it anymore. He retired, and I'm having a mental block here. But anyway, we're gonna start this. It's 3 minutes past. Guys, welcome to the second episode of ProSeller Talk. It is my pleasure tonight to have my good friend Stephen Peterson with me. If you don't know Stephen Peterson has an e-commerce podcast that is very well known. He has interviewed many of the top, what I call e-commerce sellers out there, the movers and shakers, I like to call them. And Stephen has, like I said, he's interviewed a lot of these guys on his podcast, and I've been on there a couple of times, and it's kind of like a reverse role. It's like I'm interviewing the interviewer, which is kind of different this time. So if you guys don't know who I am, I'm just going to give you a little background of who I am. My name is John Bullard Sr. I founded my inventory team, my fulfillment team. I have this webinar series I'm doing here, among other things. And I've been an Amazon seller for probably FBA for now about 4 years. I do multiple millions of dollars in sales on Amazon. We do a lot of private label. We do wholesale. I mean, I wrote books. I wrote a book that Stephen is actually going to be in. It's our second book with Ryan Rieger that I wrote. It's called Circle of Influence. We're going to talk a little bit about your circle tonight, too, in lessons learned. So you kind of have an idea of what kind of people you want to follow. And you want to follow successful people. You want to follow people that are going to help you grow, not only as a person, but as a business person as well. And I first and foremost believe that God is the first thing you follow. After God, then it's family, and then it's your business friends. So I'm going to introduce Stephen real quick here and let Stephen tell you a little bit about himself. And hey, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. Really appreciate it.
You want to talk about a little bit, Stephen, who you are, for those of you that don't know who you are, and give a little bit of background. I talked about your show, but I know that you've got some other things that you have done and how you got started with eBay. I kind of looked over your bio a little bit and saw that you've done eBay, you've done some Amazon, and you have some really great stories about why you do what you do too. So you want to go into a little bit about that, and we can ask some questions once you do some of that.
Sure. So Stephen Peterson, I have a podcast called ecommercemomentum.com. And hopefully by the time that you see this, my new website should be up. But I talk to successful sellers because I like to talk, and that's a true statement. I always say ask Andy Slamans, because him and I did a 12-hour trip one time, and man, I'm sure I talked his ear off. I just enjoy talking, and I love talking about this kind of stuff. So I appreciate it any chance I can get to talk to other sellers, and especially other successful sellers. And so I started selling, my wife and I, 4 or 5 years ago on eBay. Went to an antique thing, figured out there's some value, took my business skills, my business education. I have a business degree. I went to business school, actually. After I have an accounting degree, and then I went to business school. and applied that to the business, and made some money. And it's like, ooh, that's interesting. And so 2011 we went live on FBA, Amazon, and that is just a model that is just incredible. Still an eBay seller, still an avid eBay seller, still have over 3,000 SKUs. And in John's book, when it comes out, you'll see a picture of some inventory, because I'm an inventory guy. I'm an accountant, so I have inventory locations. That's how you manage that many SKUs. I have multiple items in that SKU. So sometimes I bought a few stores, so I'll have 30 of an item. Well, to organize that, you really have to when you're scaling that kind of thing, that's a process I can do. So that was a big advantage. And then, Amazon FBA has been just a great business, and have scaled that pretty large. But I'm still a part-time seller, just a part-time seller. I'm very content, pretty successful, not boasting or anything, but really enjoy it. And so now still selling Amazon, still selling eBay, and work full-time, and really enjoy it. I have 2 boys. My oldest is married, 2 grandkids, and then I have a younger son who's in college. And that's really kind of how, it really became about, was because it's like, I have a good job, and we could afford to send him to college, but we also want to retire, and we want to retire with dignity, as Dave Ramsey would say. And so those 2 things, they come to a head at some point. And so I was able to figure out that this is a great side hustle. In my case, it's truly a side hustle. And I can earn a very good living doing it, and put him through school. And I'm fortunate now he's home for the summer. He's helping mostly in my eBay business. Then he's actually going to school about an hour away from us, and he's going to be working for another FBA seller in their warehouse while he's at school. And I think that's going to be a great thing for him to learn too. So that's kind of my story.
Great. Hey, Stephen, if you don't mind, in the beginning, you've been doing business now for over 25 years. You have your MBA in business. What made you decide, or what gave you the idea that you could sell on eBay, or eBay would be a good platform for you to help supplement your income? When was that decision made, and how was that decision made?
Well, it's funny. We went on vacation, I guess 6 years ago, and we went to a little town in Pennsylvania called Lidditz, Pennsylvania. And we were there, and there's a chocolate factory there. It's outside of Lancaster. And we went to an antique show just for something to kill some time, and found some really cool things. Turned out they had some value. And I'm like, ooh, I only paid this, and I could sell it for that, and I can make the difference, right? And so where do you sell it? It was eBay. And that's how I knew that there was value, because I looked it up. And so I started selling, and I had immediate success. I mean, just immediate success. And I recognized that I have a skill of recognizing value. I recognize value in items, in people, and that transferred very well into business, into this business. And so the eBay business really took off. I remember selling some books, and I remember going to a book sale. Didn't think anything of it at the time. This was, 2008, 9, 10, whatever. And I remember going to a book sale, and I saw this guy with this little scanner. And at that time, I was in contact with somebody from Amazon who was kind of from Amazon corporate. I don't remember his name. He was in finance or something. And since I'm in finance, we hit it off. And I sent him a note just saying, hey, I saw some guy with the scanner. And he sent me back a note. He said, oh, Steve, there's tons of them out there. And he sent me a link to something. And then that's when you get the PDA, right? Everybody remembers having the PDA before the phone. And, back then I was using, I was telling Chris Green, I can't remember the name of the company that handled the scanning. And then I would scan, and the hassle was you had to download the database. Back then you had to download the database every night. And so it was books only, DVDs, some CDs. Had some success, bought some DVD stores, actually bought out 2 or 3 stores, bought all their inventory. And then I realized that my scanner could scan toys. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting, and started scanning toys. And boom, that kind of led me away from books, because toys were more fun, and bought a lot of toys. Since then, I've bought some hobby stores. I bought a cake pan store, a Wilton kind of cake pan store, the whole store. I remember buying a hobby store, and they took out 28 cases from their attic of old models that were still brand new in the boxes from the model companies. And that was pretty cool. And so I remember buying all those things, and the scanning just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And lots of that went to FBA, but then some goes on eBay, and I still have a ton of it, of course, because there's just so much of it. But it just evolved over time. I see that today when I talk to people. It's a very similar story.
Yeah. So, and I remember, I remember the days of eBay when you didn't have scanners and didn't have PDAs. And, you had to go out there. And I remember John and I in our earlier days where we would actually go to the stores, write it down, and call him on a telephone. And he would have to go and look it up to see if it was something that was going to be profitable. Now, you said you had a good eye for profitability and knowing something it was going to be profitable or not. Could you explain a little bit? Because I know there's a lot of sellers out there that struggle, whether it be eBay or Amazon or any platform, where they don't know that how to find something that they feel is a profitable item. So can you kind of go through some of the strategies and what you do that determines you to be able to whether or not it's profitable or not?
Okay, and then I have two different approaches, one for Amazon, one for eBay. Let me talk about eBay first. So what I've learned now is, and here's a great way to learn, right? Go through, every town has antique malls. Excuse me, our town has 3 or 4 of them, right? Walk through the antique mall. Each one of the booths are owned by somebody different. And the way that works is they put it in there. When it sells, they have to pay rent, all that kind of jazz, but they don't have to sit there. So they're buying it at yard sales, flea markets, whatever, auctions. We have a lot of auctions in my state. So when you start walking through and you see a mustache cup, right? If you don't know what a mustache cup is, you should look it up. It kind of looks like a coffee cup, but it has a little thing for your mustache, and blah, blah, blah. If you start to notice that, and you notice it in more than one booth, it's something you never want to buy. That means it's not scarce. And you start learning what, when you see something, you just start knowing, oh, I've seen that before, I've seen that before. And you start storing them in your mind, because if you've seen them before, that means it's not rare. That means it probably doesn't have a lot of value. What you're looking for is the thing that you say, oh, I've never seen that before. That's unusual. If it's unusual, generally, it's a great place to start, because more than likely, if it's unusual to you, and I think about, the hundreds of thousands of things that I've seen, just over time, you do this, you just see so much of it. When it's unusual, you're like, if it's unusual to me, that probably has some value. You look it up, and generally, it really does. I mean, every so often I'm surprised, but generally it's like, okay. And then you do a lot of, like I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I see people talk about things, and, you just start to understand what makes that unusual. Why is a Robert Graham show? I was at a party last year, 2 years ago, and we got talking about it, a friend of mine, and he started talking about it, and I see this guy walk up. I said, I have a great shirt. He goes, oh, thanks. I'm like, that's a Robert Graham. He goes, how did you know that? Well, you do this long enough, you could recognize that shirt from the distance, and there's value there. And I did ask him to sell it. He wouldn't sell it, but it's a true story. So you learn those things. And so I've been very fortunate with that. On the Amazon side, I stay away from the end caps of stores. So I've done the Target clearance. Don't do it again. I haven't been in a Target store. I can't tell you when. I'm turned off to that stuff. And so we did lose John. So I'm a little concerned that you can't hear me. Can somebody type something to make sure you can still, John is back. Okay. John, I don't see any chat even. So just so you know, that's fine. So anyway, so when I look at like Target end caps and things like that, I did it. I recommend any new seller has to go through that, but I stay away from those things. So again, I'm looking for higher priced items because I want to do less work for more money. And so I'm now at that point, my average selling is probably $40, 40 something dollars. And I'm trying to ratchet it up because I sell mostly clothes and shoes now. So you just learn that over time. Again, you're looking for the unusual. You're looking for the brand. If sugar paper was hot, more sugar paper is good, right? And you start learning those things, and then you stay away from items that I saw today. Somebody said that Big Mouth, right? If you ever sold Big Mouth toys, right? Those were the blow up toys that they make a circular ring that looks like a donut with a bite out of it, or a pizza. And I remember buying those at Five Below, when you can buy it at Five Below, that's cheap, right? and now they're blocked. And so, so it's just things like that. Those are the techniques that I would use.
What are some of, I was here, I was just checking the chat. So when I check the chat, I take myself off camera, so you'll see.
Okay.
Anyway, what are some of the things that you've learned as far as the learning curve? I mean, we all have to go through a learning curve, and we all, have trial and errors. What are some of the things that you might want to share with the people here as far as that you've learned, like lessons learned, things that you've learned that obviously you can pass on and hopefully help somebody else not make that kind of mistake?
Okay, so let's use, because this is a very current one, Target toy clearance. Right now, Target's running a massive sale. They do it every year this time of year. And what they do is, and if you haven't figured this out, if you look at a Target store, there's a little, clearance, little red sticker, right? See my hand here, little red sticker. And on the top right-hand corner, it's going to say 30. Well, that means it's 30% off. And then they run it at 50, and they run it at 70. Once in a while, they'll run it at 90. Generally, they stop at 70, and then it goes to liquidation or what have you. But here's the thing, is that you're going in there and you're like, oh my God, these are the best toys. These are blah, 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 blah. The problem is every Target in your state is running the same sale, pretty much. They kind of do it regional, but then they're going to run it all the way across the country. And so, if you go to 2 or 3 stores and you buy all that stuff, well, there's 150 or 250 or 350 of your friends, your compadres, are going to do the same thing. And what's going to happen is that price is going to decline. Many times with bellwether toys, the stable toys, the Legos or whatever, it'll recover depending. I mean, there's a few Legos that you would never want to buy, right? Chia things, right? Or Chima. But generally speaking, those will recover. The other stuff doesn't. And so you end up losing because you have limited capital. You found this stuff, you think you're going to make a ton of money, but it goes very quickly. So if you're fast, you get it in quick, boom, make your money, move on. But you don't want to try to plan a business around it. That's not a long-term solution. Buy a couple of them, learn what not to buy, and then that's the tuition. I call that tuition, And I quote Matt Kelly, one of the young guns. I always love what he said. He's like, Steve, if you buy it at the right price, you could ride it all the way down to a break even. Name a business where you can buy something and the worst case scenario is you break even. It's unheard of. It's a great business to be in. But again, you got to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and I think some of the things too, is that, and you might agree or disagree with this, but I found over the years, I don't do a whole lot of that arbitrage, retail arbitrage anymore, because Amazon is gaining so many more sellers day after day after day because of their advertising, and everyone out there is promoting them, and they're all over TV, and they're all over the media and radio. And one of the things that I see is that retail arbitrage, especially what you're saying, name brand, even toys that are clearance that are name brand like Hasbro or Fisher Price or what's some of the other ones out there?
Mattel, Barbies, Mattel.
Yeah. Those toys, you can still become very profitable, but you've got to be very creative, and you have to bundle things that are going to make sense that go with them. So what you do is you find a toy that is very, very hot on Amazon that you can get that might be in a top 500 of the rank or something like that, and bundle it with a Mattel toy, and it's going to help you so that your competition is not as much as it would be if you were trying to sell it as an individual piece. Now, the best thing to do is try to, when you're bundling things, is bundle something from 2 different places. You don't want to bundle things that I found from the same manufacturer or the same outlet store, for the simple reason is if you bundle it and it's coming from the same store, it's nothing for Joe to go to that same store and buy the same thing and bundle it and have the same success you did. So if you are going to bundling it and you do want to stay in that retail arbitrage arena, then you have to think out of the box. You have to say, hey, listen, maybe Target has this one, and then I can go to maybe a regional store that's not a Target, that might not be in the East, might not be in the West or the South, that may be only up in the North, and start to think out of the box and be more creative. And I think if you do things like that, retail arbitrage can still be profitable. Other than that, I see retail arbitrage as an avenue where you get in and get out now. It's not like it used to be. 2 years ago, you could have retail arbitrage and hold it, and the price would come back. Like you said, there's so many people and so many items out there now, and so many sellers that don't understand how to sell the proper way on Amazon because they've not been trained the proper way, and it really tanks that market, that you do have to think out of the box and start to look at bundling. And I think that's going to become the norm in the next 2 to 3 years here. As far as if you want to buy retail arbitrage, you're either going to have to bundle it, or the stores are going to cut you out and not sell it to you, and they're going to sell it to liquidation places and let them deal with it.
Yeah, and there's a couple points in that. Now, David Hawkins will do $3+ million, 100% retail arbitrage. So put it in perspective. There are people that still can do it successful. However, he's not in the toy business. He'll sell toys, but that's not his model, right? So he's got a very specific. So you want to get your niche right, and you can still do that. I think, as you mentioned, liquidation, I was thinking about ASDs going on right now. I remember last year going through ASD and seeing the same items. It's basically my concept about eBay. When you walk through that antique mall and you start to see this same coffee cup in 4 different places, that means it's not precious, it's not rare. It means it's easy to get. You'll see the same thing at ASD. You'll see liquidation soaps and cleansers and all that stuff at every single booth. Or what was the water pitchers, the Brita water pitchers? Almost every booth had them. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this possible? Well, they all got it from a different, they're all liquidators and they all have it. So guess what? That price will fall. That's your clue. When you see it more, that it's not unusual and rare in the same way that you'd want it to be. And you're not going to be able to hold the price. What's going to happen is you're going to get in because somebody's going to buy it cheaper than you. I think that people don't realize that somebody will buy it cheaper than you. I just had a deal. Somebody sent me a note and they're like, hey, these are particular costumes and they're whatever. And he was like, you got to buy them all. I'm like, sure, I'll take them all. How much do you want? Well, negotiate $2. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. I mean, are you sure that's enough? And they were like, sure. And they're going to deliver them to me. I'm like, oh my God. The wholesale price on this, because it's right now selling for $89. The wholesale price usually is the Keystone markup. So, $45 plus shipping to get it to you. Somebody bought that. Some retail store paid $45 to get that product. These are brand new cases. I have 140 of them or whatever. They paid $45 for it, wholesale. I'm buying them for $2 a unit. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how many people have been involved in this to liquidate it all the way down to $2? And so you got to consider that. The other thing you got to consider is that many new sellers don't understand the cost structure. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You're going to have returns. You got to factor that cost in. Hopefully it's only 2%, but if you sell shoes like me, it could be 14 or 15%. And it's a $4 restocking charge from Amazon. You've got to build that cost in. So the $50 you thought you were going to make, it gets a lot less. And a lot of new sellers don't understand that. And so they quickly sell and say, hey, I just made, $7. Well, no, you didn't, and so there's a learning curve there. And that's a challenge, but we all been through it. That's why I keep saying to people when somebody's like, oh, they shouldn't do that. I'm like, dude, you did it. We all did it. We've learned. Hopefully people are learning a little quicker.
Yeah, and you made a good point about the trade shows. Like I've talked at Vegas. I mean, I was a speaker there a couple times, and what I also do is I take people out onto the trade show floor at ASD, and I actually show them what you talked about was actual wholesalers or liquidators being there. But there's also, and you can find this out. And again, it's working the trade show and knowing what you're looking for. You can go onto the trade show floor and you can find like Northwest. I'm sure you've heard of Northwest. They were there for years, the ASD. But Northwest had 7 different vendors that were carrying their products on the ASD floor besides them being there. Now, Northwest is the manufacturer. So if you've got Northwest, the manufacturer there, and you've got these other distributors there, you've got to know. I mean, pick up the item, see what it says. If it says Northwest and the booth doesn't say Northwest, the chances are they're not the distributor. And you got to recognize that. And sometimes you also got to recognize that you may be able to go to the distributor and it could be $8 for the item, but it's $8 for the item at the distributor. It may be $6.50 for the item at one of another distributors, right, 2 aisles down, and it might be $9 or $10 at the actual manufacturer. Now, why is it more at the actual manufacturer? Because the manufacturer wants you to buy a whole lot more, and the distributor is buying what the manufacturer wants them to buy as far as volume, so they can pass on that savings to you. So sometimes it's reversed. Sometimes you can actually get a better price from the distributor by the way they're buying it than you can by the manufacturer by the way that you have to buy it. Because if you're not buying those large quantities, they charge you more. I've learned that at the trade shows, and how to be able to, to leverage that and just have that knowledge of knowing that who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a distributor? Or are you dealing with a manufacturer? Are you dealing with a liquidation company? And those things are key factors when you're actually going to a trade show and trying to, and drill down that pricing and try to get the best price for what you said. But you also said something that I found very interesting, and a lot of people do not consider, is their return rates. And like you said, with shoes, Amazon's got a $4 restocking fee. I'm almost willing to bet there's nobody out there, or very few people, that consider that restocking fee when they're purchasing and going through their profits and losses. I can almost guarantee that they're not doing it, because there isn't any tools out there that I know of yet that talk about putting that $4 restocking fee in there.
But it's simple math. It's simple math. So let's say you sell 100 pairs of shoes, right? And you're going to get 15% returns. Okay, well, there you go. 4 times 15 is going to be returned, right? So you're going to have to put that in. So you could actually divide that out over what you sold and put in that cost. You want to put in, your administrative costs. You have, when you scale, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody and they're like debating about margins, right? There's a lot of discussion about people putting gross sales versus margins. And, in all businesses, sales really are what drives, the way you run your business is the efficiency difference between you and I, and it might be 1 or 2 points, but on a scale, that's a lot of money, right? But generally speaking, when you speak in general terms, your sales are you're going to lose margin the larger you get, because you have to have structure, and structure costs, right? It's fixed costs. And so, when you start factoring those things into your business, you'll quickly understand how strong or weak your business is. And when you get to that point of understanding those numbers and working your way through, I was helping somebody, I'm like, how much money do you want to make? Okay, and then with a few other numbers, you could quickly determine how many items they need to buy that'll sell through and all the rest of that kind of jazz. All this stuff is calculable and it's worth doing. But, you've got to have some help. And so, reach out to somebody and ask them for some help, and they'll help you calculate that. And you'll be like, oh, that's a cost I never considered. And when you start considering those things, you might turn away that buy, because you might say, oh, 30% is great. Well, no, not if you have another 15 or 16% you didn't consider. Now all of a sudden, or somebody else posted something and I'm like, well, 1 return will wipe out your profit for, 15 of them. Are you sure you really want to do that? Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, and that's somebody working on those small margins, and then, you're already working on small margins, and Amazon or another seller decides he wants to liquidate and tank his price, you could get hurt real bad by that. So I think the other thing, Stephen, that is really important for is, like, in the last couple of years, is that sellers need to know it's never been more easier to calculate things and to figure out whether if it's a good buying decision or if it's not a good buying decision, what rank of a product is. I mean, how many is selling? You got Jungle Scout, you got Ace Inspector Pro. I mean, you got these tools out there now that weren't there 2 years ago when we were building our Amazon businesses, that can really cut down on that learning curve. And I think one of the biggest things that I think people need to take away from this is that when you talk about learning curves, is if you want a learning curve, answer to a learning curve, is that it takes money to make this business go. And in order to make this business go, it's like any other business. If you're going to invest in yourself and you're going to invest in the business, you have to have the right tools. You need Jungle Scout. You need a tool like Ace Inspector. I mean, you just need you need Camel. You need all these things, that anything that's out there that is going to make your job a lot easier when you're doing your research.
Well, you're more informed. Yeah, you're more informed, because if you don't understand it, somebody else will. I give this example, right? And this is the truth. So, 51. We did not have computers in my high school till my graduating year. Literally on the way out the door, they put in computers, and I think they had 6 of them or whatever. And it was the math teacher teaching computer class. I didn't have that advantage. Now, I learned them. I went to school, took computer science and all that kind of jazz. My sons, both of them, we've had computers long before they were born, right? I think we have 8 of them in this house, right? At any given time. They know nothing but computers. So the learning curve that you and I had to learn how to just even to use these things, they don't have. So they adapt. Why do you see so many young guys and girls adapting to all these different tools? Because they don't have the learning curve we do. So if you don't put the time in to learn it, you're going to find yourself falling short, because very quickly these other guys are going to do it. So you really need to have all those tools. And the education is just so critical. If you're not investing in yourself, I said this to somebody, if you're not having fun in this business, go get a job. I mean, go get a job. Don't burn yourself out if you're not enjoying yourself. It's not worth it.
It absolutely is. And I think another thing too is that, if you are going to treat it as a business, at some point, I think a lot of people get analysis paralysis, where they get into too many different things all at once and they never complete one thing. They just kind of jump from one to another, and they got half projects here and half projects there. And one thing that I think that is hard for people to do is to go out and give up some of their business to somebody else and teach them what they know, so that you can start to outsource it and delegate to other people. And once you're able to do that, and only once you're able to do that, that's what we found when we started. When Jim Corcoran told me, John, you're not actually, you have a business, but you're working in your business. You have a job, he told me. You're not an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Yeah, he says, and in order for you to not have that job, you have to give up some of that control, which was very hard for me. I don't like to trust anybody with my stuff. But once you give up that control and you start mastering what you know and teaching somebody else and have them do that for you, then and only then are you going to start to grow other income sources and start to grow your business. And once he told me that as part of his mastermind group, the only one he has, once he told me that, that's when we started to really take off. And that's when we started to get multiple streams of different incomes. And when he told me, you know what, master one thing. Very important for who's on this call. Master one thing, get very, very good at it, and then give up control of it and teach somebody to do what you do, and probably they could do it better than you. And that was the other thing too.
Or stop doing it if you don't like it. There's lots of ways to make money in this business, and I think that's another thing, is you got to figure out what you like to do, and if you don't like doing it, stop doing it. Don't. I think about the wholesale people that I've interviewed. I've had 4 or 5 different models, maybe 5 or 6 now. Different wholesale people who have courses, right? They all have courses, and they're all incredibly successful, selling $5 to $10 million. All 5 or 6 of them do it different because it works for them. You've got to figure out what works for you. If you don't resonate well with Steve or John, hey, find somebody you can connect with, and make sure that, because again, this should be enjoyable. This shouldn't be, I say this, you're developing a lifestyle business. There's a key word in there, life. Life, you got to have a life, and so otherwise, you're just chained to a desk, and that's no fun. That will not last, and you will get tired. So enjoy life and find what works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, stop doing it. Move on to the next thing and find something you really enjoy doing, whether it's part of it, whether it's buying, whether it's the shipping. There's a seller, I haven't interviewed him yet, but we've shared information, and he's like, Steve, I hate the selling part. I just don't like it. He likes the prepping part. So he opened a retail ARB prep center. That's what he does. Only retail ARB for a couple select sellers, very close, very personal, one-on-one. And it's like, that's what he loves to do. I'm like, that's great. You have figured it out. You have a big advantage over most of us because you figured it out. Good for you.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that concept. And I think that you and I kind of figured it out, because I think that we're kind of both from the same kind of a mold, where I like, and I know you do, you enjoy interviewing and talking and helping people. And that's what I try to surround myself with in the circle of people that I have with Jim Corcoran, Skip McGrath, and all the people that I've interviewed over on my inventory team site. And on this one that I'm starting, is that, you know what, my calling from God, I believe, is to reach out and help as many people as I can. Now, not everything I do by reaching out and helping people is going to make me money, but that's not what it's about. To me, it's not about that. It's about the satisfaction and the gratitude of someone coming and saying, you know what, John, I really appreciate, or you know what, Stephen, I really appreciate, because of what you said, or I applied from what one of your guests that you brought in said, I'm able to do this for my family. There's no greater reward in the world, and there's no capital that you can put on that to be able to give somebody that, be able to help them in that way. And I think you're that way, and I think I'm that way. And there's others out there like us that are that way. I mean, it's very far and few in between, but what I like about is that there actually are people still out there that are willing to give of themselves unconditionally. And that's kind of rare in today's society.
See, now I take the different approach. I believe there's good in everyone, and so I try to find the good in everyone, but I don't do crazy. So if it's crazy, I'm out of there. I don't connect with them, and I will disconnect from them. But I struggle a little bit with that teeny little bit of notoriety because I'm very uncomfortable with it. I always say this: I'm shy on the inside. I'm actually very outgoing, but it's very uncomfortable for me to take that compliment because it's like, geez, all I did was talk to John Bullard and understand. And when he said something interesting, I dug deeper because I want to answer it in my mind because I think other people have the same question. When it helps somebody, it really is it's very enriching and very rewarding. A little uncomfortable to handle because when you hear that stuff, but man, it's just so neat. The nicest people in the world I've met in this business, and I don't know many businesses where that's the case. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, there isn't. And like you said about, I'm the same way. I'm very, very humble, and I never try to give myself credit. When I speak to them and I talk to them and I mentor them, they kind of look at me like I'm this, this information guru, and I'm not. All I am is someone that's done things, learned some things, learned what I don't know from people that do know, and willing to pass that on and help other people. And it's very, very humble. And when I went to CES 1, and I'll never forget when Jim Corcoran said how many people use the Bullard prep service, and 2/3 of the room raised their hand. That was the most humbling. That was very, very humbling to me. And it just almost brought me to tears because it's like all these people entrusted their businesses with what we do. And it just goes to show you it's all about character. It's all about the character that you possess, because if you don't have the right character, and I don't care how many times you interview somebody, people can read and see right through you if you're genuine or if you're not. And I think that's huge.
I think you're right. And so when I get somebody who didn't have the right character, my answer to them is, hey, make the next right decision. Right? You make the next right decision, and you make the next right decision, and make the next one. All of a sudden, you start to see a pattern, and then you start to see blocks. Right? That foundation is building blocks, and I've seen some people leave the business because it's not working for them, and they messed it up or whatever. They borrowed a bunch of money, which I never advise, and they made a mistake. Get past that. Start building those blocks again by making right decisions, connecting with the right people, and just being a good person. And you'll start to see that build over time. And I've seen a lot of people, it's interesting, as I mentioned before the show, the pre-show, is that I've gone back. So I've interviewed, episode 116 comes out tomorrow. And so I've been fortunate to go back and interview some of the people I've already interviewed a year later. And it's so cool to go back. And I intersparse them in between new people. But I love it because I get to go back and say, okay, John, this is what you were talking about doing. This is the direction you're going. And then a few times people are like, yeah, I decided against that. I figured out something else. I'm like, that's cool. To me, that's what's so cool when I get to go back and talk to them. And it doesn't mean they failed. It means they figured something out. And I tell people all the time, they're like, well, what's the thing that you get from the podcast? What's the secret that you've learned, Steve? For me, I've learned what I don't want to do. By talking to a John Bullard, I don't want to run a prep center. Pass. I'm not interested in it. I don't want those headaches. I don't want that responsibility. That's not something I'm interested in. Well, getting what you don't want to do is like learning what not to buy. That's a big advantage because you can just look past a whole bunch of things because that doesn't interest you. And that's a very cool place to be.
The other thing is, like you said, you've been interviewed. It's going to be episode 116. By the way, congratulations. That's a huge milestone to get that many people to come on your show, because it does show, and I know you're very humble, but it does show the quality of the kind of person you are for those people that want to come onto your show. So that's a huge accomplishment. But for somebody new, to get into this a little bit, I know your why and why you do it. We all need a why. Without a why, you don't go anywhere. You have to have a why and what drives you. Someone new just coming on, Stephen, that's just starting on Amazon and wants to do this business, and all these people that you've interviewed have given you all kinds of advice, all different pieces from different kinds of personalities. what have you picked up from those personalities that if someone was listening tonight or going to listen to this replay, that you would say to them, this is how you should start?
Okay, so I wrote down 6 what I call lessons learned. I've given this discussion, I've given it in a bunch of different events, I've spoken at a few conferences, and been interviewed a couple different times. So I kind of scratched down a few, and I'm thinking these to me are kind of some of the things, and they're said different ways by different people, but they all kind of mean the same thing. So here we'll just blow through 6, and we can talk about whatever one you want. You can do it alone. You can do this business alone, but it is nowhere near as much fun doing it with someone else. So someone suggested to me the other day, they're like, hey, if you're new starting out, find somebody else new starting out and then work together, because together you're going to learn what 3 or 4 people can learn together, because you're going to get to discuss, oh, I heard it from this and I heard this. Okay, and you'll figure it out. So that's number 1. Number 2 is when you give, you'll get, right? So if you're giving and helpful to other people, you'll get so much more. You know, don't be so isolated. Don't, you know, somebody helped John Bullard get into this business. Somebody helped him along the way. So what does John do? John helps other people. And so that's what it takes. And so you want to be giving. There's some secret sauce that you want to keep to yourself. I get that. And that's cool. We all do it. But generally, you want to help other people and you'll get all the help you need. You want to buy time. So as John mentioned, a bunch of different apps. Don't go buy them all. That's crazy. Because again, you might not like to be a buyer in this business. So you buy all this junk and then you give up using. I see people giving up their scan fobs a lot lately, or people have the gloves or whatever. If that's not your thing, don't go in investing that until you figure out what you really want to do. Again, I've been very fortunate because I've learned what I don't want to do. You also need to learn what not to buy. We've all been there. We've all bought that junk. Buy it, make your mistakes, learn from it, and then move on. Respect matters. Respect, and this is a life lesson, right? These are a lot of these are life lessons, but respect matters. You know, you have to be respectful of other people's opinion. Just because John says something doesn't mean he's wrong, and you don't agree with it, doesn't mean he's wrong. It just means that you guys disagree. John might be proven to be right, or in John's world, it might be right because he's at a different place than you are. And then I'd say the final one is there are many ways to be successful or approach success in this business. You've got to figure out the one that you like, the person that you resonate with. There's so many starter courses you can go to, and I get a lot of people saying, hey, who should I go to? You know, and I get a lot of those questions, and I'm very fortunate because I'm in most groups. Most groups let me in for free. The paid groups, I don't do anything. I generally don't buy anything from those groups, but I get to see what kind of way they handle their groups. And so I'll get somebody, and John will come to me and say, hey, Steve, you know, here's what I want to do, and here's what I'm interested in. I'm very fortunate. I can say, you know what? Kristen Ostrander is the right person for you because she's got that personality, or Robin Johnson, or Sam Cohen, or Andy Slamans, or Bob Willie, or, you know, this, I could go on and on and on and on. And it's because, you know, there's lots of different approaches. You got to figure out which one. So again, those there's a lot of ways to do it, and those things I think are really important. So take your time. Don't go after the shiny object. Master the one thing. Learn retail arb. And if you don't have any money, don't learn retail arb in Target. Learn it in the thrift store. Go buy books. Buy books. Greg Murphy will tell you, buy books. Cheap, easy. You're not going to get suspended over them.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially the part in the beginning where you said number 1, where you said do it with somebody. And I know that you know that I do this business with my wife and my children. And
That's
I
awesome.
can tell you, doing it with my wife and children is so much more rewarding and fun because you get to do it with them as you're doing things, that it just makes it more worthwhile watching them do it and just being able to do the things that you do with them and not doing it alone. It's never fun to do it alone. You always want to do that with somebody. You know, so I thought when you touched on that, you kind of touched on a subject that is near and dear to my heart, because I think that if you do have a friend or a husband or someone that you, business acquaintance or somebody that you want to build a business with, or not even build a business with, they can build theirs while you're building yours. Just kind of have somebody that you can bounce off questions and bounce off suggestions to. It's always good to have that other person. Like you said, you've got 115 different interviews that you're like a sponge now that absorbed all this information. And if somebody comes to you and say, hey, Stephen, I'm thinking about doing this, they do the same to me. and I will point them, you know what, I think Chris Green is the right person for you, or I think Robin Johnson's the right, or Andy Slammons, or Jay Bean from Scanner Monkey, you know. We have that privilege of being able to be connected with them. How did we get that? That didn't happen overnight. That happened because of credibility and what we provide in groups as value that they see, and they want to kind of network with us so that we all work together for a win-win-win type situation.
Yeah, I don't take it for granted, and I'm very humbled and I'm very blessed. I really do appreciate it. But if one of those people came to me saying, hey, I need help, I'm there for them, because you know what, they've been there for me. So it is, I understand that, and I don't take it for granted in any way. You know, I think again, you know, this is a business that you can, you know, it's funny, you know, I have a business degree, right? And you're taught, man, business is tough. It's cutthroat. It's this and that. And it can be. And there are people that'll be so much more successful than I, because that's the way they run their business. Good for them. That's not me. It's never going to be me. I'm okay with not being that guy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that in my world. But, you know, I won't be as successful as you. Good for you, John. More power to you. That's not my thing. And I'm okay with that. So if you can get okay with that with yourself, you know, that self-awareness, I know that's a Gary Vee thing and everybody's hot on it, but it's so true to be self-aware that I'm not going to be the top seller. Nope, not interested. I'm not going to be Sam Cohen. I always use Sam as a great example, and I'm friends with Sam. I've been down to his place a bunch of times. I'm in his group, and I don't want that responsibility that Sam has. I don't want it. I you know, that's Sam. He's larger than life because he's good at it. That's him. That's not Steve.
Yeah, and everybody, like you said, everybody has what they're good at, and everybody has their comfort zones. And I think that you touched on a very a good subject there too, is that you can't be like somebody else. You have to be who you are, and you can't try to build something just because someone else may have something that is better than what you have. It's everybody's definition of what better is. For me, better means having the ability to do what I want when I want, to not answer to bosses, and just have total control of what I want to do. To other people, you know, it may be different. It may be to have the lifestyle where they have a job that's secure. They work 40 hours a week. They come home to their families and they spend time with their families, and they get weekends. You know, everybody is different and what they want in their life. And some, I'm not knocking working for somebody. There are people that absolutely love it and have careers and retire from it. But then there's people that are out there that want to have more and want to have more family time, and they do things a little bit different so that they can kind of get that quality time whenever they want to be able to see their, like for me, I want to see my granddaughter when she's at a recital. I can go on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock or a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to have anybody tell me that I'm not able to do it. That was my choice. Not everybody has that, and not everybody wants that choice. So it is about choices.
And the choices cost something. Remember that choice costs something, right? And so you've got to be willing to give up something to make that choice. And that's okay. Once you understand that and you're comfortable with that, that's a very cool place to be. I try to teach my kids that because I don't want them to be beholden to a career. It's a different world today, and career is relative.
And that's the other thing I was going to say about family is, as you being a dad, what do you, when your kids look at you and they see what you do in your career, and then they see you having your podcast and things like that, what do they say to you as far as when they probably ask you? I mean, I don't know how old your kids are. I'm not involved with that too much, but I mean, what do they say to you? Like mine are older now and they see it, and I kind of think that John Jr. followed in my footsteps a little bit on the business side, and Danny, my other son, followed in it from the standard of being, his work ethics are really good and how he gets things done in a timely manner and does things like that. What do you think your children do as far as seeing what you do, as far as what is their thought process of what my dad does and, you know, what they think of it?
Yeah, I just got my birthday, and I got one of the most amazing cards from my both sons. My one son just sent me just a beautiful card, but my other son said, to a dad, a friend, and it was just so cool. You've been there to help guide me and be there whenever I have a question or whatever. The coolest thing I get now is my older son. He's 30, and he's an engineer, chemical engineer, and advanced, and his wife has got an amazing position too. And they'll call for advice or they'll ask for advice because of experience and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's the cool thing about when you have that kind of relationship, where And sometimes I'll give them the advice that, you know what, go talk to my daughter-in-law's father, because he probably knows that better than I am, better than I would. He can give you better advice than I could. And so I think they know that, I remember my older son saying, hey, his B plan is if he ever loses his job, he's calling me and he's immediately going to scale up his eBay business, because he's got an eBay business too. I just think they understand the work ethic. I think they understand, I've had a pretty good career and I've done all the things. I've missed things. I've gotten called back from vacation. When you have one of those responsible jobs in a publicly traded company, you get those calls. And I've had that over the years. I don't want that ever again in my life, because that's the way it was. I don't want that. I've taken myself out of that loop. I'm not interested in moving. In the company I work for now, they've tried to move me a zillion times. Pass. I'm not interested. This is where I'm going to retire from. This is about, I'm winding my career down. So they see that. And my coaching to them all the time is, value experiences, not stuff, because you can buy a lot of stuff. You make a lot of money, you can buy a lot of stuff, and you don't need stuff. And so I think they see that. They see my efforts here is, I'm very fortunate that I've created a side business that's going to allow me to, quote, retire early. And this is what I'll do more of. And so I think they see that and they understand that, and they both have a little bit of a side hustle going. So that was something that they picked up, is not to be reliant on one company or one thing, learn another skill set. So I think they picked that up from me, and I hope they carry that forward. I have grandkids. I have 2 granddaughters, so I'm actually at that age.
Yeah, I have 2 grandkids too. I have an 8-year-old granddaughter and a 6-year-old to be in a few days grandson. The other thing I find interesting too is that as we get older, as like I'm in my 50s like you, and my son's in his 30s, we kind of bounce things the opposite way, because I'll ask my son, what does he think about something, where before it was the first way, but now they're old enough where you bounce it the opposite way. So I kind of find that real interesting. I want to open this up to a few questions before we let you go for the night. Is there anything in the chat that you see, or let me take a look?
I'm not sure I can even tell how to see that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Guys, if you have any questions for Stephen at all, now's the time. You can post them in the chat, and Stephen will answer those questions for you.
It says only presenters can type in the chat. Does that mean that there's something that we don't have set?
In the chat, I can move it over, so I'll move them over as I see them.
Okay.
So if anybody has anything in the chat they want to just type it in there, and I'll make sure that Stephen gets it.
John, I wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about some of the people that I've interviewed in my podcast. I have seen almost everything, and you sit back and you think about, I just interviewed an 18-year-old kid who realized that where he was going to go in college wasn't what he wanted to do. He was very self-aware at 18, and he's having incredible success. And his success is relative. He wants that quality of life. But I've also interviewed, guys in their 70s who are having their level of success. And I think that is the coolest thing about this business. I think of Robin Jacoby, who said that, race, religion, sexual orientation, sexual preference, age, other than being over 18, unless you have your parents' permission, whatever, all those things, this is a business that's ignorant to all those things. It really doesn't matter. Those things really don't matter. And to me, that's what's so cool about this. If you're not in this business and you're thinking about getting in it, you really need to dip your toes in it, because it can be the most rewarding thing. But you might not want to sell. You might want to package, or you might want to be a administrator. You might want to do the accounting work. You might want to do, there are lots of places in this business to find. And you can do that, And so when you look at some of the people that I've interviewed, you'll hear some of those things, and it's just so cool. And you just don't see that in most businesses.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying too about all the people that you interviewed. I mean, the stories that you have. I mean, you can just write a book just on the stories that you have from all the people that you interviewed. I mean, and just the information that was given to you and shared with you was just, I'm sure it's mind-boggling of all the different ways and systems in place and how everyone does what they do, because that's just great to be able to be filled with all that knowledge and all these people, like I said, that have come to your show. And
well, the relationships too. To me, the relationships are the best part of this. I mean, I've made amazing friends. Angie Slamans and I mean, we're going to Vegas in, I think, another week and a half. Then we'll be heading down to Nashville together. And we've been on, a bunch of trips together. Or in March, I'm sitting in a hotel room with Chris Green, Brendan Sullivan, Crazy Jason Smith, and Andy Simon, drinking beer and just relaxing, just talking in real conversations, not only about e-commerce. These are real relationships. I remember a couple of years ago hanging out with Ryan Witeska, Peter Moyes, Ryan Grant, Andy and Craig Anderson, Greg Purdy, and just those relationships. Now I could call one of those guys saying, "Hey, I need help," but to get friends, you've got to be a friend, right? Those kind of things. And so again, to get help, you've got to give help. And so again, if you put the time in and you develop these relationships and don't ask for anything, just try to help people, you will get so much more. And that's what I've gotten from the podcast. I'm very, very lucky, and I understand it. Again, I don't take it for granted.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you with that. I mean, I think 100% how I built my reputation is by going to the CESs and going to these conferences. And yes, the speakers on the stage are great, but the relationships that you make out of those audiences and the networking that comes out of those audiences are by far, to me, worth the price of admission. More so than the people that are on stage talking. I mean, granted, you want to know what they're saying, but you're going to get a lot more from the audience. And that's where, you talk about, I remember staying up late at night with Jenny Hunt in Dallas at CES2. And we built a partnership, a mastermind group with Ryan Rieger out of that networking at midnight, so it's those late hours.
I saw you sitting there on the couch. I remember you guys all sitting on that couch. I saw you down by the bar. I remember. But you know what I do remember too, John, is I remember your wife sitting there. I remember your son sitting there and his wife. And together, to me, that struck me. And I still remember seeing that. Watching. That's very cool. That's a very cool place for you to be, to have that depth of relationship with your family. Very cool.
Yeah, and them sharing it, like I said, with Jenny, and it's kind of funny that you saw that, because
I did.
What you saw was, people getting together and brainstorming and trying to figure out ways that they could work together, and how we can not only work together, how we can bond and be able to help others, and that's how those whole things happen with Ryan Rieger. Jenny and I built that, and I told her that I think Ryan Rieger would be a good part to bring into this group that we're trying to build. And we've done tremendous things with him with my co-ops. My WhatsApp co-op is flourishing with those two. And, we have other things that we've done together, the Empower You, and we have a wholesale course that we did. And it's just like you said, it's just going and building those relationships. I have relationships with Bob Willie. I have relationships with Chris Green. Chris Green and I have, done things with the mastermind groups. And I have relationships. I know Andy Slamans pretty well. I've partnered with Chris Green. with Skip McGrath and his wife, Karen. I know them really well. I partner and done partner and deals with Jim Cochran. None of that's possible if you don't get out there and put yourself out there. And number one key is put yourself out there and help somebody, and don't ask for anything in return. I promise you, if you go out there into the groups and you start answering questions and you ask nothing in return and you start providing value, whether you like it or not, you're going to get people following you.
This is a funny story. So I spoke at Sam Cohen had a conference in New Jersey, and I spoke at his conference, and we're at a restaurant bar that night or whatever. And two guys I started a conversation with, really nice guys. And I said, hey, what's going on or whatever. And they were kind of starstruck by Chris Green. And they're like, oh, a little intimidated. They want to talk with him. I'm like, well, just go introduce yourself. Oh, I don't know. I said, all right, let's watch this. I bought him a beer. I brought it over. I said, hey, Chris, here's a beer. Oh, man, that's really nice of you. Thank you so much. Hey, would you come over and can I introduce you to two fellas? 30 minutes later, I had to separate. I'm like, it's getting uncomfortable. You guys have been talking way too long. They never put themselves out there. And now, my advice to sellers is, other people want to tell their story, love to talk about this stuff. So you got to go and say, hey, Chris Green, you're a real guy after all. Can we talk? Can I ask you a question? He's going to say, absolutely. He's going to absolutely say something. You're going to walk up to a John Bullard, and he's going to say, sure. What's your question? I'll help you. Sure, whatever. And that's what you got to do. Somebody has figured out or ran into every problem you're going to run into in this business. So you can ask for help, again, but you got to put yourself out there. So true stories.
Yeah, and that's how things actually get started. And like you said, you have to, it's just like when the first time I ever spoke, to a large crowd was in CES1 in Orlando. And I remember getting up in front of 400 people and just like, okay, I got to do this. But I also looked that it was my calling, and that I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it and I think if you look at this and you have the mindset that I wasn't doing it for me, I was doing it because it was my calling, and that something that I say helps somebody else, then I owe it to say it. It's not that, I shouldn't look at it as keeping it to myself, but if it's going to help even one person, then it's my obligation, I feel, to put it out there to help that person. And that's how I got over the fear of being up there talking in front of 600 people, is just by putting myself up there and saying to myself, you know what, I'm here for a reason. And that reason is that my story, if it helps just one person, is worth me getting up there and sharing it. And that should be anybody. If you feel that what you have can help somebody and provide value to them, then you should put yourself out there, not for yourself, but to realize that you're doing it because the possibility of what you're doing can help somebody else. And I think once you get over that fear and you understand the concept behind that, it's a lot easier to do.
Makes sense. I can't disagree with you a bit.
So I don't want to keep you any longer. I mean, we're a little over an hour here. And I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to thank the people that came on here tonight and took the time out of their night to listen to this webinar with me and Stephen Peterson. Again, we know you have other things that you can be doing. We know that there'll be people that will also be watching the replay, but we want to thank you guys for taking time to come here. And if you have any last minute questions, now's the time to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to let Stephen go be with his family and do what Stephen wants to be doing. And thank him for coming on here. And Stephen, I'm going to give you the last word. As like I said, I've been on your podcast a couple of times, a big space in between. And I know you've told me this personally, that the changes of when you first talked to me to the changes of when you talked to me this second time are so different in that time frame. And that's what I think I like too, is I like to see 6 months from now where Stephen is and where the people that are out there now, where they'll be 6 months from now. It kind of falls into place of who just wants to listen and likes to listen and absorb information, and then the ones that are out there that are taking action and doing what we kind of try to help them get over their fears to be able to do. So Stephen, I'm going to give you the last say, and then we'll sign off here. I don't see any questions, but it's been my pleasure as always talking to you. I enjoy talking to you. You're a wealth of knowledge, and you've had so many different guests on there. I don't know if I'll ever catch up to you, but I know that
I like to talk, John. I just like to talk. I do. I really do love to talk about this stuff.
Everything you do, I know you don't want to hear this because you're a humble in person, but everything you do, I truly admire, and all the things that you're bringing to the table, and the groups that you're in. I'm very familiar with a lot of the groups that you're in, and what you provide for value for people. So, I mean, I know God blesses you, and I'm just thankful to have you as one of my friends and be able to bring you on to my show and share your knowledge with the people in this webinar.
Very kind. I appreciate it. Very, very humble. John Lawson told me, Steve, just say thank you. So thank you. That's it. I don't want to downplay your words. They're very kind. So the website's ecommercemomentum.com, where I have a podcast. I like to talk. I do have a blog out there too. It'll come out a couple days a week. In addition, the podcast is twice a week. So I pump them out, man. Everybody's like, how do you do it? I do it. I just enjoy it. And I will have 2 a week, maybe even more if I want. I enjoy it. And so I hope you get something from it. If you see somebody who you think is worth interviewing, and everybody has a story, and I don't mean it that way. I don't want to downplay everybody, but I'm looking for that different kind of story. I really enjoy, there's a great episode coming out tomorrow. The guy has been in he spent 300 nights in a hotel last year. That's a cool story to me. That's very interesting to me, and I was able to talk with them. And so that's a cool story. So I'm looking for those kind of stories. So if you know somebody, just send me a private message on Facebook. I'm out there. Just reach out to me. And if you have an issue or a question, I can try to help you. Lots of times I'll direct you to somebody, or I get a lot of inquiries. Hey, this is my inventory team, blah, blah, blah. Is this worth, and I get to say, I know John personally, and if you're not getting a response, send John a personal note, those kind of things. So I've been very lucky that way. So feel free to reach out to me because I want you to be successful, and success again is relative. I want you to be successful for you, because that life is so important in that lifestyle business. Please have a life. Don't work 24/7. Please don't. That's my story, John.
Hey, Stephen, if you want real quick, you can post that link in the chat for your e-commerce podcast. We'll get that in there so that they have that.
Okay, let's do that. Now you put me on the spot. I'm not that technical
Sure,
savvy. Remember, I'm the old guy. So
there you go.
Podcast.
You guys want to check out, like Stephen has his podcast, I think, was it once a week?
Twice a week, John. Twice a week. 2 episodes every single week, and probably 2 or 3 blog posts every single week. I wrote 15 of them on my vacation. So
Stephen has his link up there, guys. So I would highly recommend that you start following him if you don't. I mean, he has a lot of top-notch guests that come on his podcast and share a lot of wealth of knowledge. The great thing about it is it's free, and we love free. If you can get information for free, and nowadays that's not as easy as it used to be, I mean, I suggest that you watch his podcast and see the guests that he brings in and the value that he brings in. I can 100% tell you that if you watch his podcast and listen to some of the guests that come on there, that your business will grow and grow quickly with the knowledge from the people that he brings in. Thanks again, Stephen, and you have a blessed night.
You too. Thank you so much, John. Take care, everyone.